3 on the nose here. Welcome, everybody. King Operating allows me to do these macroeconomic overviews that are basically just information that's coming through from around the world, things that I think that every human being should understand, especially every American who has any sort of interest in the economy. Any investor around the world should understand these things. I'm giving you factual events. I'm trying to stay as far away from giving you a theory or some sort of wild rabbit hole to go down here. So today we're going to be running through about 5 different topics along the way. Most of the things that we'll be talking about today are really kind of trying to be hidden in the world. And when I said that to people about a year ago, everyone looked at me with cross eyes saying that's crazy. But I think we've all been through the media cycle and watched things in our lives occurring while the media tells us everything is fine, although we're seeing these like crime and all these other things. So it's important that we get grounded as a country, as a society, that we put ourselves in a position where we are, full of knowledge. Obvious from the cross behind me, I'm a Christian, and God says in the Bible that His people shall perish due to the lack of knowledge, and that is something that I'm trying to provide a service for. This has nothing to do with King Operating in our fund or anything like that. This is simply extra educational information. It is the opinions expressed in here are mine and mine alone. I should make that very clear, but there's not a whole lot of opinion in this. Is very much fact. So let's go ahead and get started here today. Let's see if we have we've got our numbers together here. So welcome. I hope all of you had a great Father's Day. All the fathers out there, I've got my number one dad, family square, whatever that is. Love Father's Day. Spent 6 hours driving my daughter to camp, but it was great to have the whole family in the car and just stopping for lunch and just good old American road trip type thing. So I hope you all had a great Father's Day as well. I hope you're having a great week. I hope you're having a better day tomorrow on Friday when it's the end of the week. Let's hop into it. The topic of today's, we're calling these rice reports, I guess, is the economic multiverse. So that's really where we find ourselves in today's situation. We are literally living in an economic multiverse. If you don't know what a multiverse is, it's multiple universes colliding at the same time. Economically, we find ourselves in that very same position. As it stands today, statistically and economically, we have been in a recession for about a year or a little over a year, somewhere in that time frame. However, there is a board called the National Bureau of Economic Research, the NBER, that officially announces whether or not we're in a recession. And this is the way America works. You could go to the grocery store and pay $30 for 2 eggs. You're still not in a recession until the NBER says that we are. So until they are, I guess we're not, but I'm going to go ahead and boldly say that we're already in one, and it's not just America. It is wrapping itself in its arms all across the world. The tentacles of this recession are global. The tentacles of the entire economic system is global. That's what globalization does. There's no longer a single nation that's unimpeded by downturns in economies. That is what globalization has gotten us. It has made more fragile supply chains. You can definitely get things cheaper, that's for sure. But if you remember a few years back, globalization really exposed itself when there was an explosion in a paint plant and you couldn't get a brown Honda for about 9 months. And that was just a part of the pigmentation of the paint. So, and I know that because I worked on a technology product to try to make supply chains globally more efficiently. Very difficult task, by the way. So this economic multiverse, what does that mean, Eric? I have no idea what economic multiverse means. Well, now that we know that a multiverse is multiple universes existing at the same time, we find ourselves in the same position. We're currently in a recession. We're approaching something much darker, potentially, and there's really no way out. Our Federal Reserve and our Treasury are completely cornered. They don't have many moves left, and we are the ones who will pay the price. So where we stand right now, we're either going to be entering into a period of stagflation, deflation, or hyperinflation. And hyperinflation is pretty easy to understand. The costs just go crazy and the money declines in value. Deflation is the prices of things drop and the value of money increases. That's kind of hard to see without some sort of economic change, like a gold backing, a new currency, or maybe digital currency. Stagflation is more likely. And here's why. Before I get into why, you should understand what stagflation is. Stagflation is a combination of slow economic growth, high prices through inflation, and high rates of unemployment. Now, if you've listened to any of these reports that I've done, I've been a bit vindicated. So probably about 3 or 4 months ago, I've been doing this on my podcast and in meetings here at the office for a very long time. Matter of fact, when I first started working here, I started telling people not to trust the government reports that come out over the next year. And everyone thought I was crazy. I thought I was crazy for that matter. I wanted to be wrong. I want to be wrong on a lot of things right now. I'd rather be happy than right. It's a fundamental theory in life. However, how can I possibly say that we're approaching stagflation? Because the third component to stagflation, economic slowdown, rise in inflation or prices, plus a rise in unemployment. Well, that can't be possible, Eric, because the government tells us every month. Again, I'll rewind last week. The National Bureau of Labor Statistics has beat their own estimates for the jobs numbers 14 consecutive times, a 1 in 16,000 chance that would happen, and they beat Wall Street every single time. So clearly, either we have the greatest statisticians and the greatest economy in the history of the world, or perhaps those in power are lying to us. Now, why would I say this? Number one, because I believe it to be true. Number two, jobless claims today rose to their highest levels since 2021, today. So in the midst of all these new jobs that are being created and these economic reports we're getting from the National Bureau of Labor Statistics, at the exact same time, jobless claims rose to their highest rate, their highest level since 2021. That is an oxymoron of oxymorons, but let's stay with it. Through this process, we are starting to see unemployment rise across the board. Is it a possibility moving forward? No way, Eric. Our government will absolutely do whatever it takes for us to fight unemployment, because every American has the right to earn a living. Now, these are fundamental practices that we see all across belief systems. And Mark, yes, we are recording. So thank you for coming. I see that you're leaving. Thank you for coming. We'll definitely be recording and putting it up on YouTube tomorrow or later tonight, depending on how busy we are. Now, in the middle of all this, Federal Chairman Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Powell, came out and said a few things in the last couple of weeks that every American should be paying attention to, and almost no news network in the country is actually covering it. First thing he said, the Fed just paused rates. They did not get the return or the effects in the economy that they were looking for. Powell also said, after he paused rates, that rates will remain high in this country for at least the next couple of years. So we should anticipate a high interest rate environment for at least the next 2 years. The thing that he said also along this line is he said, in order for inflation to drop, unemployment must increase. So if you think about the people that we pay 30, 40, if you're in California, 51% of your income to, their job is really easy. Break stuff, blame it on other people, make up a story, start all over. It's a very easy job. So in order for them to fix what's happening right now, they must break what they've done. I mean, they consistently make bad decisions. This isn't a new thing. Our Federal Reserve is, by the way, is a private corporation. It is not a federal organization. It's a private bank that prints money for our country to use as a debt instrument. And we use our hard-earned time, money, and real assets to pay back the interest. So we'll stay with Federal Chairman Powell. He came out and said at least 2 more raises are necessary this year. So after he just paused and said rates will remain high, he also came out and said they anticipate 2 more rate increases for the rest of this year. Now, if you're in real estate, or if you operate your business on working capital loans, or if you have a credit card, or you're getting a new car or buying a new home, you are feeling the impact of an economic system, a society that has been gotten gluttonously fat, living off of 0% interest rates for the better part of 12 years. We are now in normal interest rate environments, around 5%. And that interest rate environment is probably a new normal. Actually, it kind of should be. That higher rate keeps inflation from ravaging us every 15 to 20 years. But I don't anticipate any changes will be made. So we're going to have 2 more raises, higher interest rate environments for 2 years, and unemployment must rise in order for inflation to be defeated. Now, why do I think that we're entering, it's not just me, by the way, it's a lot of people think that we're entering into a period of stagflation, because the jobless claims are at their highest level since 2021. These are absolute facts. But is this just happening here? What's happening in America is happening all over the world. This is the problem with globalization. The benefit of globalization is you get to save a little bit on labor costs, you save a little bit on consumer goods, and everything is easy to get until it's not. So we're approaching this problem of globalization and miscommunication or misinformation coming from trusted sources. This is what's creating the danger. It's very simple to see. Now, the Bank of England just raised their rates another 0.5% today, up to 5%. Now in England, this is causing the same problem it's causing here. Turkey, who's experiencing 40% inflation rates, which people think is crazy because our government tells us we're at 5% inflation. Every analyst, private analyst in the world will tell you we're in double-digit inflation right now, and we're approaching an era that could be hyperinflation, which is 80%, 110%. If you have any friends from Argentina, ask them how easy it is to live in hyperinflation. It's exceptionally troubling to think that our nation's heading in that direction. They've declared recessions in Germany and New Zealand. These things have already happened. In the middle of all this, we have added. This is the statistic that the news doesn't share with you very often. In the last 2 weeks, pretty much since we signed another passive agreement for the debt ceiling, which anyone who doesn't know anything about the economy said, oh, what a great thing. We're not going to default on our national debt. And that'll save the dollar. The dollar is doomed at this point in time. And I'm going to explain that. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in the next year. But if we look 20 years down the road, I cannot, and no logical person can see the US dollar being a global reserve currency. But I digress. In the last 2 weeks since we signed the Debt Ceiling Act, which pretty much allows the government to print another $4 trillion between now and the beginning of 2020 or the end of 2024, which they're going to do. They are not going to put anything in reserve. They're still going to ship money to Ukraine. They've shipped another with this new I'm going to get into that in a minute, but been still shipping money overseas. Doesn't serve the American people at all, but they still keep doing that. We guarantee our taxes are going up, so it's important to find tax shelters, which is one of the reasons I work here. But we've added $572 billion to the national debt since we signed that act. I'm going to repeat that number, $572 billion. Over $500 billion has already been added to the national debt since we saved the debt ceiling. Now, what does that mean? It's just 2 weeks, by the way. That's just 2 weeks. So imagine where we're at 3 months from now. But what is 572? We live in a world where, if you counted 1, 2, 3, a new digit every second, to count to a trillion would take you like 31,000 years. I mean, that's what $1 trillion is. It's an ice age of time frame. So $1 trillion, $500 billion, almost 600 billion has been added to the US debt in the last 2 weeks, just alone. That now, excuse me, a little under the weather today. That now pushes our debt limit to exceed. We have more national debt in America than the combined GDPs of China, Japan, Germany, and the UK. By the way, those are not 4 random nations. China is the second, depending on the stat, second or top economy in the world. Japan is the leading economy in the South Pacific. Germany is pretty much the benchmark of economies in Europe. And the UK is pretty much right behind it. So you have, look at the 2 largest Asian markets, China number 1, Japan number 2, 2 largest European markets, Germany and UK. We now have more debt on our books than they produce in their gross domestic product every year as an entire nation, not companies, an entire nation. That debt is not sustainable. The bill they just passed will not do anything but put a Band-Aid on this for probably another 6 months at best, because we're adding so much to the national debt every 2 weeks now. This is something that's occurring frequently. Debt now exceeds those 4 GDPs, and I'll repeat this, combined, not the GDP of China or Germany or Japan or UK, combined. This puts us in a very strange position, because if from all ways and means, my average day-to-day life is still pretty much what it was, 6, 7 months ago. You wake up in the morning, you get in your car, you drive to work, all seems the same. Gasoline prices are still manageable. They've come down from all-time highs, which doesn't do any good. They're still high. We have this normality feeling behind us. And in the midst of all of this, just US economic turmoil information, what is the news bombarded with? They're not telling you about, Russia and all these other things right now. They're talking about a submarine with a billionaire being lost in the Atlantic. If that's a real story, my heart goes out to the families of the lost. Nonetheless, is that the most important story that will impact your life that the media should be sharing with you? Probably not. So what's been happening during that time frame? Where should your focus be instead of a submarine that went to see the Titanic? And of course, there's some symbolism with that because the Titanic created the Federal Reserve, if you know anything about history. But at the same time, if we're looking into this whole situation and saying where, they're telling us to remember when you were a kid, or if you have kids and you take them to go get photographed for Christmas pictures and they won't smile when they're really little, the photographer usually pulls out and say, hey, look at the birdie, and he takes the picture. That's kind of how the media is acting. They're the look at the birdie, don't pay attention to this. So here's some interesting things that are happening. The world's starting to talk a lot about wheat. Wheat, oil, and eggs are kind of the foundation of many foods. Wheat is produced in mass quantities here in Russia and Ukraine. Those are really big baskets for wheat. Now, obviously, Ukraine is being leveled. I won't even get into that because our government has told us that it's right now 7-to-1 ratio, Ukrainians to Russians dying. The Russians are saying 10-to-1 ratio. Nonetheless, Ukraine is losing a war that we keep financing constantly. We've put over $1 billion back in their hands. By the way, in the middle, speaking of Ukraine, in the middle of the week here, our government announced that just kind of randomly, they overestimated $6.2 billion worth of equipment, which now doesn't mean, hey, that's great, we get to save 6.2 billion. No. That's now going to be used for more Ukrainian cash efforts. Ironically, 2 weeks before this accounting year, the head of national defense for Ukraine on video stated that they would need at least $6.2 billion more to continue to fight Russia. So in the middle of all this, we have a submarine lost. And what's happening with wheat? Why is wheat an important topic? Well, number one, the wheat fields are being decimated in Ukraine, and Russia is withholding a lot of their output. So we're really relying upon American wheat in America right now. And with globalization and global supply chains, that simply won't last. So you can expect the price of your food to continue to rise, despite what Chairman Powell is doing at the Federal Reserve. What other stories are important in the middle of all this, Eric? Well, there's a bunch. A company called BlackRock. If you haven't heard of them, you should, because they own anywhere between 10 and 21% of pretty much every major company in the world. They are at least $10 trillion asset manager. Some estimates are up to $17 trillion. They just joined forces with JP Morgan. Why did they join forces with JP Morgan? Well, they went to Ukraine and they restructured their national debt. So right now, BlackRock and JP Morgan are working to restructure national debt for Ukraine. That's great, right? Sounds like a good idea. What does that mean? Well, when companies come in and restructure national debt, they don't do it for, a tax write-off. They certainly don't do it out of the kindness of their own heart. They do it so they control future contracts. All deals at this level of finance and nations, everything comes at a cost. If you look at the Chinese for the better part of the last 2 decades have been doing what's been labeled soccer stadium financing. You go to a third world nation that's robust in natural resources, you build them a soccer stadium that there's no way that they can pay you back for. And in exchange for them not being able to pay you back, they'll take over the port over there and build a military base over here and take over some of your infrastructure. This is not a myth. This has been happening in Africa and South America for a very, very long time. The Chinese have a very big stronghold on this. The Chinese are also in bed with BlackRock and JP Morgan, just like everyone else. But when BlackRock and JP Morgan decided to take over restructuring the national debt of Ukraine, they essentially made it easy for them to get their most recent contracts. So BlackRock and Vanguard, another big player in the space, they actually just structured a $500 billion contract to rebuild Ukraine. So if you still think that Ukraine is just a random war out of nowhere that no one benefits from, you're completely wrong. Right now, you're looking at BlackRock will now profit from the refinancing of debt in Ukraine, and they are now up to at least $500 billion in contracts to rebuild the country. This is what's happening right underneath your nose while you're paying attention to a submarine that's lost in the Atlantic. Now, what's interesting about JP Morgan recently? Well, JP Morgan just today, I believe, had a subpoena to release a bunch of records involving their relationship and JP Morgan and some other large players, and Jeffrey Epstein and some other major players like Prince Andrew and other people around the world. And ironically, their IT department just happened to have randomly, accidentally deleted 47 million records. These are big, big stories that are not being told really anywhere. And all of these have an effect on your life, not today, not tomorrow, but certainly in your future. BlackRock has also launched 2 new ETFs, or made changes to one and launched another one. BlackRock is now entering the cryptocurrency space. They've launched and announced that they filed for the approval to build an ETF for Bitcoin, which essentially means they're going to take another commodity, wrap it in paper trading, and control the price. This is what all of these organizations have done with commodities all around the world. I've been talking about gold and silver with you for a very long time. And I am a gold and silver person. I believe in tangible assets with a declining dollar. I'm just a logical human. But what happened with gold and silver is it used to be a physical traded commodity. Now you have a paper market, which is what creates the spot price. So there's now a spot price that's controlled by long and short trading, which is very easy to manipulate. If you get all the people you know and put a bunch of money towards the short, the price will drop. If you go long, the price will go up. So places like BlackRock are now applying for ETFs. They're not the only ones. There's been about 6 major financial institutions who have essentially filed for ETF trading, which will allow them to wrap their arms around a very independent market. Now, they're not just going after Bitcoin. Some of these ETFs that are coming out are looking at doing the same thing with Ethereum and XRP and some of these other well-known cryptocurrencies, some of which will make it, some of which won't. I don't have a crystal ball, but it's interesting nonetheless that in the middle of all of this, they actually have an ETF, which is a currency ETF for all the BRICS nations. So those who think that BRICS, and I talked to economists probably in like November about BRICS and de-dollarization, I was kind of laughed at. And thankfully, it's kind of turned around. People are starting to take this a little more seriously. So BlackRock has an ETF. So to show their support for Ukraine, it used to be called the BRICS ETF, where they would buy currencies and trade them from the BRICS nations, which are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So in order to, I think, there's no definitive way around it, but they removed the R. So in order to restructure the national debt of Ukraine, they had to change the name from BRICS to BICS. So the BRICS ETF is now the BICS ETF. Nothing has changed within the portfolio. They still overweight their investment 84% towards the Chinese yuan. So this is kind of the world that we live in. It's a very cloak and dagger, symbolic world where media is not used as an information source. It's used as look at the birdie. So many other things are happening that you should know about. Number one, I think the thing you should know about right now is people are really starting to talk heavily in the fintech space. Fintech is financial technology. So fintech creates payment systems, payment platforms, bank management systems, and all types of software that allow money to move easily, money to be tracked easily, taxes to be done, like TurboTax is fintech. It's financially related technology. The largest topic that's being talked about in fintech right now is what's called friction technology. What is friction technology? What does that mean? Well, in order to understand what that technology is, you have to understand who it's being built for. It's being built for the banking systems. Banks are approaching an era of what's called banking friction. And it is just like it sounds, but let me explain it to you. They want to create mechanisms that provide more friction or make it more difficult for you to withdraw your money. So I've been talking about bank bail-ins. I've been talking about Frank-Dodd Act. I've been talking about all these other things for a long time. And we're starting to see more and more evidence that this may be the case. Because to be frank with you, the banking sector, despite what Janet Yellen said in January, I think it was January or February, she came out and said, the banking system is fine. These 3 banks that collapsed, that's pretty much the end of it. And that's simply not true. It's not true because the Federal Reserve came out in March and said that bank runs are much faster than they used to be. A bank run used to take a year, for enough deposits to be withdrawn from a bank to collapse the bank. These are now occurring within hours. Silicon Valley Bank saw the bulk of their deposits withdrawn from the bank in the first 12 hours of known poor economic conditions. Another thing that everyone should know is that banks don't hedge interest rates at all. They do not. Their investment portfolio has absolutely no hedge built in for interest rates. So let me rewind a little bit. If Chairman Powell came out and said that they're going to raise interest rates at least 2 more times this year, but more strategically and at a better pace, and that interest rates are going to remain high for the next 2 years, I think it's a logical deduction to think that banks are in trouble because the bank investment strategy does not hedge for interest rate at all. And they have lived and existed and thrived in a 0 interest rate environment for the better part of the last 12 years. So we are approaching a large scale bank crisis. And I don't know what that looks like. We'll find out when it happens, but the numbers don't lie. So in the middle of all this, with large bank runs, the Fed talking about bank runs being faster than ever before, Janet Yellen telling you that the banking system is fine, pretty much evidence and proof coming out that at least the jobs numbers, if not the EIA, the oil numbers, the gas numbers, every number that's coming out is not to be trusted. Trust your own eyes. But in the middle of all this, the largest fintech buzzword is friction. So banks all around, there are 9 nations around the world right now, I don't remember off the top of my head, that make it very difficult for their citizens to withdraw their money. In places like Lebanon, they've already had riots and banks being burned down because people couldn't take their money out of the bank. These are facts. These are things that are happening right now around the world. We don't hear about them, but they're happening. I happen to pay attention to these things. Now, bank friction makes it difficult. Bank friction is a term that we've never heard before. I would bet if any of you have ever heard of bank friction before, that would shock me, because I hadn't heard about it until about a month ago. And now I'm starting to hear about it everywhere. So let's look at bank friction and what that could mean to us as just normal people here in the United States. Well, bank friction, making it difficult to pull money out, was started with something that occurred in 1970. In 1970, we passed an act called the Bank Secrecy Act of 1970. This essentially allows banks to not have to disclose to you what their future or current intentions are. Yes, that is a real bill that was really passed, and it's still in existence, the Bank Secrecy Act of 1970. When you combine that with the Patriot Act, which is another one of these acts, like they give them great names that do awful things, like the Inflation Reduction Act, by itself was contradicted the first day that it was put into existence, because in order to fight inflation, they wanted to print $1.7 trillion, furthering the problem of inflation. Now, the Patriot Act is really no different. The Patriot Act is the act that basically said if you take out $10,000 or more from your bank account, the bank has to file paperwork with the federal government that you have now taken out more than $10,000 from your bank account. That still exists. Here at our office, we deal with wire transfers all the time. We deal with investment partners, and we have a fund, and we drill oil. We'll deal with bank wires every day, literally every day. And in our team, we see at least 6 to 8 times a week very interesting things, and we've seen these for months and months. When I got here, I told people this would happen, and no one believed me until we started having banks call us before we got wire transfers. It's none of the bank's business where you send your money. However, the Bank Secrecy Act and the Patriot Act allow them to do so. Now, we also see things right now where a $200,000 investor has to send 4 $50,000 wire transfers. That is correct. Even for the accredited, the banks are now restricting how much money you can move. Last time I checked, our Constitution said that our money is our money and it's none of their business, but apparently it is. We see this all the time. We've seen this 3 times this week, where we get a series of small wires where we used to get one larger wire. So this is definitely happening. With the podcast and things I do, I have a lot of people that reach out to me. I can tell you at least a dozen banks right now are asking questions if you go and withdraw cash. And it doesn't matter if it's $10,000 or it's $100. They're asking you, what are you going to use this cash for? It's none of their business. Tell them it's none of their business and to give you your money. That is constitutional. But we are seeing this. That is what's called bank friction. It's also called financial tyranny. We are living in it. It's not a theory. It's not something that may come in the future. It's something that exists right now and today. So what does bank friction have to do with anything, Eric? I talked early on, and I talked often about what a CBDC is, a central bank digital currency. This is a topic many people touch, few people understand, even less take seriously, but you should. Our banking system, the IMF, the global bankers, the central bankers around the world have been pushing for a central bank digital currency for the better part of a decade, and it's just now coming out in the news. Essentially, what a central bank digital currency is a fiat in digital. Our dollar has next to no value. It's actually a debt note. If you read it, it's not money, it's a debt instrument. You spend this money, you owe taxes, you pay that money back, they keep printing, it's all illusory. So other currencies have popped up, and more currencies will pop up over the course of time. Many of them have been digital. Cryptocurrency has allowed an ease of usage into people understanding that digital currency is the future. Here's a quick lesson for you. If you have a bank account and you bank online and you send payments online, you're already using digital currency. It's a digital dollar. A central bank digital currency is nothing different, except for the fact that it has massive control measures. If they don't like what you say on social media, they can cancel it. If they don't like that you're withdrawing money, they can freeze your account. If they think that you are a flight risk from the country, they can restrict your usage of that money to within a 5-mile radius of your home. Try going on vacation with the CBDC when you have any sort of government oversight. Very difficult to do. In the middle of all this comes the FedNow program, which launches July 1st, right around the corner. We'll be in July 1st in a little over a week. FedNow comes into play. FedNow is a great name for actually what's called OP 1670, which is a law that was passed that allows, well, the FedNow program is the marketing angle of OP 1670. That's the best way to think of it. FedNow program, this is how the government works. They install tyrannical measures, but they give it brilliant marketing and branding. So if you look up FedNow on Google, what you'll find a bunch of government propaganda videos telling you that FedNow is a system being put in place for you to make faster peer-to-peer payments, making it easy for you to transfer money from one party to another. Well, that's already called Zelle, Venmo, and Cash App. It already exists, but now it's the government, so it'll be better, right? Just like everything else that they've done, it'll be better than what the private sector can create. But that's the whole premise. They want you to believe that this FedNow program is being installed so you can make faster payments. But if you read the entire OP 1670 document, you'll find out at the end that what it actually does is it gives full oversight and data control to the intelligence agencies of this nation. So July 1st, at least 200 banks will be launching FedNow. A full list is available online. If you can't find it and you're interested, reach out to anyone here at the firm, and I'll have them send you the most recent list that I can find. But it's about 200 banks. In the middle of FedNow being launched, we have banking friction becoming a thing. Just in reality, just in current modern day practices, I'm telling you, we're seeing it. Banking friction exists, and it's going to get worse. So as these banks who have not prepared and have not hedged for higher interest rate environments begin to fail, they will begin to restrict your ability to withdraw your money. And if you complain with FedNow, they'll shut down your bank account. You'll have to hire a lawyer and get your bank account back. That's essentially where we're going. It's not a myth. These are laws that have been passed. I'm not making any of this up, which is ironic because I wish I was. However, we're also seeing the FDIC. About 6 months ago, a video leaked of an FDIC meeting. In this meeting, the people at the FDIC sat around a table and laughed about certain topics. Those two main topics were, they laughed out loud about how fragile the banking system is. They laughed. They also laughed when they said that the citizens of this country trust the banks more than anyone in this room. That's the FDIC. That's the governing body, the insurance arm of your deposits at your bank. These are things to certainly look out for in the future. Now, what does all this mean to de-dollarization, which is something that I talk about frequently because I want as many people out there to know that this is a reality and not just some crazy conspiracy theory on TikTok or somewhere else. By the way, conspiracy theories are pretty much all true at this point. Take them seriously if you don't. At least listen to them and then look in your life. You'll find out many of them are just conspiracies. They're not theories. But it's important that people know this because we can prepare. You can prepare your own finances. You can go into hard assets. Keeping money at a bank, honestly, right now, after July 1st, becomes a risky endeavor. You may have difficulty, if not complete loss of control of getting it out. Here's an interesting story for you on bank friction. A couple weeks ago, a female billionaire in Texas, which goes nameless, but there's not many female billionaires in Texas. One of them happens to be a member of the Walton family that started Walmart. This female billionaire was trying to purchase $50 million. Mind you, she's a billionaire. She was trying to take $50 million out to buy silver eagles, silver coins, US Mint coins. The bank did not allow this until she actually said, I will pull all of my billions out of this bank if you do not make it happen. And then a few days later, they sent her 50 million. She got her silver. Two things to take from that story. Number one, bank friction exists and they don't care who you are. Number two, one of the richest people in this country is buying precious metals. Take from that what you will. I think that that's probably a good place to go. You have other people around the world, like Robert Kiyosaki, who was just at a conference we were at. And almost every person at that conference was consistently talking about gold, silver, oil and gas, raw land, and cryptocurrencies. Sound familiar? If you've been watching the show for a while, it should. But this is more people talking about what is only logically derived from the world that we live in. So let's go back to de-dollarization. How does all this work? Well, if the banking system creates and fintech support, this is the problem. This is one of the problems. The technology sector is designed to create technology to solve problems. I come from the tech sector, so I have a lot of love for the tech sector. One thing the tech sector needs to get better at is figuring out what the use of the technology they're building is for. Many of the things that have been built in our technology's private sector are being used for government tyranny. And friction technology in the fintech space should never be built. If you are watching this broadcast and you're in technology and you're considering that contract, consider your own financial future and consider the future of your children's lives. You're making it easier for the government to control you. That's a simple fact. Now, de-dollarization occurs through friction. So we've already seen right now the number is up to, I think, 64 countries around the world have publicly stated that they will no longer use the US dollar for foreign trade. Places like Brazil have already signed contracts with China for their trade, non-oil and gas trade, to be done in yuan, not in the dollar. We've already seen nations like France sell natural gas and fertilizer, natural gas derived, petroleum derived products to China in exchange for yuan. We just saw Pakistan do a large petro deal in exchange for Chinese yuan. We've also watched our government release have documents released. They didn't release them, they were released. Documents stating that they know right now that 32 nations are laundering oil all around the world through Saudi Arabia, who's supposed to be our partner and protecting the value of the petrodollar, the US dollar. The US dollar is in big trouble. Regardless of what the news tells you, it's in big trouble. And it's going to be in worse trouble as we move forward and we continue to see more tyrannical features embedded in our banking system. Why do I say this? Because dollars are dollars. It doesn't matter where they're at. Many nations around the world for the better part of a century, almost a century, have held the US dollar as what's called a store of value, a store of wealth, something that will not lose value and allows you ease of usage to buy and sell goods. Once we start putting into place friction technology and friction measures within the banking system, those frictions are going to be placed upon all dollars. So right now, we're already weaponizing the dollar and pushing many nations away from even doing business in the dollar. That's only going to get worse as time goes on when it becomes even more difficult to get rid of the dollars you don't want to use. Bank friction, CBDCs, and the FedNow program are real things to take into account. Holding money in a bank is not what it used to be. That used to be where you kept it all. Now you want to diversify and get your money into digital assets, hard assets, tax-advantaged assets, energy assets, and commodity-based investments. This is truly the path of success moving forward. And it's not just me saying that. There are a million articles written by intelligent people that are saying the same things. Unfortunately, these intelligent people don't work for our mainstream media. So that's pretty much what I have for you today with one final thought in mind. As we approach 2024, I'm not here to be political in any stretch of the imagination, but Donald Trump was asked 3 times in the last year, how would you fix the current economy? His first answer was 3 letters, 3 words: drill, baby, drill. Energy is what controls nations, not money. You need money to buy energy. The more energy we produce in this country, the better off we're going to be. And although times are difficult in the energy sector because energy is the only commodity that lost value over the past year, everything else saw inflationary rises, while natural gas and oil saw big dips. Number one, economically, that tells you you're either approaching or already in a recession. And number 2, it tells you that this is a good time to get in. So as I wrap this up with that final thought, how do you solve the economic problems we have? Get rid of tyrants, drill, baby, drill, and focus on creating a better value for the US dollar and all of the people who use it. So with that, feel free to type in questions in the Q&A section. Feel free to raise your hand. I'll pull that up. I would rather you raise your hand because I like talking to people. Call me old-fashioned. I'm not much for reading a screen and talking back to you. If you have any questions or any areas of concern or things that I can help with, please feel free to ask those questions. Eric, go ahead. First question.
Hi, I'm Eric as well.
Great name. You're a good man.
You are too. You say that we shouldn't have our money in the bank. Where do we put it?
Well, right now we've seen a $7 trillion outflow from banks into money markets. So if you wanted to be safe and cautious with cash and the cash you hold, get it into a money market account. It's not in the banks. It's going to be in a different system. But at the same time, you want to allocate it. Me personally, I take cash, I convert it to gold and silver. I invest in my own fund, manage my taxes, create some extra income, and hopefully make some money in the future. It's kind of what we're doing. But it's minimizing the amount of cash you're holding. The fundamentals around investing that I've seen over the last 20 years is that people actually buy things when they cost more, right? Like we kind of have a backwards perception of like FOMO is a real thing, fear of missing out. So we see a lot of investors put money into oil when it's $100, put money into oil when it's 70. We see a lot of investors that invest in like this. I would personally, I'm not giving advice, by the way, not financial or tax advice, but personally, I'd stay away from the stock market. But I'd certainly use money market accounts. I would find gold repository accounts to open up and convert my cash into gold and silver. I don't remember if it was JP Morgan or if it was one of the big five banks. One of their analysts was on a podcast I was watching the other day, and he's targeting $3,000 gold. I think that's aggressive, but I can certainly see gold at 2,500 this year and skyrocketing next year. Skyrocketing for gold is not the same as skyrocketing for a startup company. You're looking at 10-12% returns per year, but at least you're not losing. Look for stores of wealth. Physical assets are fantastic. You're already if you're on this recording, you're already in our fund. This is something we do exclusively for clients. So you're on here, so you have some tax advantages. Manage your taxes, keep your money in money markets. If it's cash, convert it into commodities if it's not, through investment or through physical holdings. Does that help, Eric?
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. What other funds are you in other than the energy fund? Me personally, I am considering right now getting into a venture capital fund that has a very good role for, I'm generally venture capital funds, you have to have $5 million. I don't have $5 million. But there are some venture capital funds that allow for much smaller investments for a small percentage of the portfolio. Considering that, and I'm also in a gold fund. So that's me personally, where I'm at with funds. Most of everything that I hold is cash, gold, silver, raw land, cryptocurrency. Mine, I have a little XRP, a little Bitcoin, because I don't know which one's going to make it. But I certainly am investing in those areas, as well as oil and gas, obviously. So good question, anonymous attendee. I like the anonymous piece. Asif, I think I'm pronouncing that right, Mr. Khan. Asif, what do you think about investing in startups against the economic backdrop? Longer term holds, less liquid, and much riskier asset class, but may offer outsized returns if diversified well. Your thesis, Asif, is dead on. You want to find things that outpace the economy if you're aggressive. I am not an aggressive investor. I come from the startup world. I have launched many startups in my career, and I am an employee at an oil and gas fund. If that tells you anything, I think right now startups from the ground up are very risky because it's very difficult to obtain capital. Getting private investments is difficult. Bank lending is next to impossible. It's very difficult to start from the ground up. However, Series B, Series C, and pre-IPO financing for private companies that are kind of out of the startup phase is probably a good place to put your money, which is why I'm looking at this venture fund. But me personally, you can do as you wish. I'm not giving financial advice. I am not starting a startup right now, and I'm not investing in startups right now. I am into preserving what I have in this world until this economic storm passes through. But that's me personally. I certainly think if there are good startups with viable founders with significant experience, and if there's already a decent amount of capital in the raise, then I think you have a good shot at succeeding with the right product. But that product could be the greatest product the world has ever seen. And if it doesn't have a good team, it's not going to succeed. So really base your decision in that area on the team, the product, and the current economic environment. For me personally, this is not the economic environment to be putting money into startups. They have a very low probability of succeeding to begin with. And that probability in this type of economic environment, let me change that. Not this type, the approaching economic environment that we're going to see is going to be much different in the coming months than it is today. So take that into an account. But Asif, great question. That's a great question. Let me check if there are hands up. I see Eric. Eric's still the only one. If that's all the questions we have, I'm happy and sad. I love talking to you all. Oh, there we go. Alan. You have a question there, Alan. Go ahead, sir. Oh, you're muted, Alan. I can unmute you. There you go.
Hey there. Thanks for the call today.
Sure.
How bad do you think commercial real estate will get, and how bad do you think it will affect the other markets? I know that's a hard question to answer, but I would like your thoughts on it.
It's actually a pretty easy question to answer. I'm just trying to figure out how to answer it without being too hyperbolic. How bad do I think commercial real estate will get, and how will it impact other sectors? It's an interesting question. I think commercial real estate is going to get very bad, but I think it's going to be very sectioned. I think your multifamily properties are going to get, I think all real estate's approaching a time, and you're probably near the end of the year, where you'll see a big devaluation in properties with high interest rates, making it somewhat feasible for people to buy new properties. Rates are the big issue. Commercial properties are getting destroyed. Office space in particular, office space and warehouse space, really bad sector to be in right now. We've had different pushes coming from media and from the government saying that work at home. I mean, just think of what's happening in the world. Everyone's trying to work at home. Very few people want to go into an office anymore, which means that you're going to lose productivity, which means that you're going to lose revenue and gross revenue in particular, less sales, less activity in the company, making it less viable for the company to continue to pay today's rates for rent. We have a ton of commercial real estate properties right now that are facing a tremendous amount of turmoil based solely upon the higher interest rates. So I think the office space, the warehouse space is going to get very challenging, probably not in a very short period of time, or a long period, like we're looking at a short period. But the multifamily stuff, which is considered commercial, I think it still has viability. Trailer parks, storage units, I think everything is going, the way that we're headed, when we now have more debt than the combined GDPs of the four of the largest economies in the world, there is no good remedy. There is no remedy at all to cure the problem that we'll have to go through. You know, we have an economy that is on the verge. It's nauseous. And when you're nauseous, you have to puke before you feel better. It's just kind of the way things work. So as we approach that exit stage of a bad system, and I do believe that there are things happening that we don't see that are going to improve things in the future. So I don't want to give you doom and gloom forever. I just think we're watching the end of the death of a system. And part of the way things work are, now let's look at what I talked about with Ukraine and BlackRock. So BlackRock will go ahead and use their political power, which, by the way, BlackRock had a guy named Serge Varley who was caught on camera through Project Veritas, who pretty much spilled the beans about how they do these things. It's a great video. You should look it up on, not Project Veritas, I'm sorry, it's on O'Keefe Media Group, OMG Media. Great undercover video from someone at BlackRock telling you exactly how they bribe politicians, how they control the fate of nations. When you see companies like this that have their hooks in everything, they don't mind it. They want a war. There's so much money to be made on war and destruction that this happens. So, you know, they'll help push legislation to pump more money into Ukraine, to keep destroying Ukraine so they can make more money rebuilding it. It's really no different in commercial finance. These big banks, they actually don't want you to pay your rent. They don't want their rents to be paid. They want that building to become cheap so they can purchase it and sell it to someone else. So I think when we're looking at the office space sector, it's going to be very difficult. How does this blend into other sectors of the economy? It's pretty obvious. If you can't afford to pay rent for a company, you have to go virtual, which guarantees that productivity drops. That drops gross domestic product. That creates a shrinking economy with higher interest rates. It's really nothing good happens when the commercial real estate market, you know, craps out. And I think that we're approaching that. Very long-winded answer. I'm usually not that way, but does that help you out to answer your question, Alan?
That does. Thank you.
You got it. You got it. I think we have one more, and then we'll go ahead and call it a day. From Ken, oil and gas. That industry is the whipping boy of the Democrats. Boy, do you speak truth in that first sentence. Do you expect the tax incentives to be reduced and the taxation of fossil fuels to be the way of the federal government goes on the balance books? The Dem. You are correct. Oil and gas are the whipping boy of the Democrats. And it's not necessarily, I'm not in this, and I think everyone needs to get out of the mindset of Democrat versus Republican. These are all division tactics. The Republicans and the Democrats all serve the same masters. They're two wings of the same bird. Some of them are publicly liberal, some of them are privately liberal. In the end, they make money and power based on the same agenda. That's been proven over and over and over again. Do I expect the tax incentives to be reduced? Yes, that's already happening. So the Democrats actually passed a bill, I think it was last year, if not the year before, where our 100% tax write-off for contributions into oil and gas drilling and exploration, those are already dropping to, I think, 95% in 2024. And then they will slowly boil down to zero over a 7-year period. Don't quote me on that. Rex Gifford's the guy to ask for that. But the last time I spoke with him, that's pretty much the trajectory. So if we don't actually have a fair election and a proper person elected to the White House, we are going to see no tax breaks for anything. more increased taxation and full tyranny. 2024 might be the most important year in the entire history of this country outside of 1776. That is my opinion, and it's shared by hundreds of millions of people around the world, if not billions. We are the centerpiece for the entire world. If we fall, everyone falls. Do I expect that fossil fuels to be taxed away by the federal government? You know, when they remove the tax benefits for investing, they take over investing. So I actually don't expect, if the tax incentives are removed, there's no incentive to invest in exploration and drilling, which would be replaced by government financing. What our government has not only hinted at, they have said boldly in Congress, is that they want to fully nationalize energy, which exists in many countries. The UK just went to nationalized energy. When tyrants get into play and they have full reign over a nation, they nationalize everything. You're watching in front of you the nationalization of banks, defund the police. People, it's a stupid idea, I know that, but many people supported it. What the purpose was not to defund the police so the police have less money. It was to defund the police so the police fail locally, so that you would accept a nationalized police force to come in and manage your city and town. How dangerous is that idea? Well, it's pretty dangerous. Right now, the police that actually police your area live in that town or around that town, and they're policing their neighbors. If you replace that with national police forces, which are essentially a military security force, you can impose tyranny. You also get rid of the localized sheriff. So all these things have a nationalization intention behind them. And what they're doing in oil and gas by restricting federal land leases, shutting off pipelines, truly giving out false statements about supply to lower the price. All these different things are designed to let an industry collapse so that the government can take over. That's what I see. So I don't see an overtaxation occurring. What I see is them wanting to nationalize this. And at least 2 senators and a congressman have been caught on video in Congress stating that their intention was to nationalize energy. So that is what we fight against every day. Great question. Thank you for asking. That was a great question. Next up, and we're going to make this last just to save everyone time, I am going to call on Raul. Raul, our last question of the day. We have 2 more written. I'll go through those. I'll definitely get through these. But Raul, go ahead. Just unmute yourself and you're able to talk. Or I can unmute you. Or you may have raised your hand accidentally. So thank you, Ken, for the last question. Raul, if you figure out your muting, we'll get to you in just a second. Andre, assuming there is an actual fair election, strong assumption, let's forget about parties and call names. If either Trump or RFK Jr. win the election, both have said openly that they would end the war. They won't terminate oil reliance, instead doing a smooth transitions. How does this potentially impact oil and gas prices next year? Phenomenal question. Number one, prices and costs in commodities businesses generally have a 6 to 12 month lag. So when something changes, you don't really see the effects for 6 to 12 months. So we'd be looking more at 2026, because if either one of them win, which by the way, I love RFK Jr. I think he's great. I don't think he has a chance in the world. I don't think anyone has a chance in the world of beating Trump based on experience. And the fact that he's already fought this system and provided a smooth economy, which is what most people care about. Number one, they would end the war. That war is being fought over money. There's a very distinct possibility that war was actually started to create funding. The way wars work is pretty simple. You start a war, you create a conflict. By the way, our government is provoking Russia at every chance they get to take it to another level because they make more money. Our military industrial complex, they charge astronomical rates for the same part. This was on 2020 or something the other day. There's some part that goes into a bunch of engines that you can buy on Amazon for $4 or $5. Well, the government will pay $10,000 for that same part. So this is how it works. They start a war, they pick a side, they rally for that side, they convince a bunch of people that side, absolutely must support this nation and their cause, and it's generally the exact opposite of what they tell you. And then they gain support from the people, they print a bunch of money, they send it over there, they buy $3 parts for $10,000, and all their friends get rich. That's what war truly is. No one wants wars. I think Trump can end the war quickly. I don't know if RFK can, but I'm assuming if he won, that he would have Trump's support to do that. That war, there are innocent lives being lost on both sides every day. The fundamental theory of war is nothing more than a bunch of young people dying so old people can make money. And that is pretty much what we're watching, what we have been watching since the moment we were born. They won't terminate oil reliance. They can't. So when we hear all this crazy green energy stuff that comes out literally every day is a news story saying how we can use solar power has no chance. Wind power has no chance. Actually, I just went to our wells in Borden County, Texas, and I have a picture. And picture didn't do any justice, so I took a video. While our well was pumping oil, which provides real energy that can be used 24 hours a day, it was on the backdrop behind that ranch had about 15 windmills. So the ranch owner leases out space, some to wind farms and the rest to us for oil and gas. Not a single windmill turned once in 6 hours, not a single one. In Scotland, they've proven that windmills are turning because they're hooking them up to diesel generators. So it's an optical of the wind turning the wind turbine. So there's no chance for green energy. It's truly a myth, and it's being designed so everyone who owns shares of green energy companies gets free taxpayer dollars to build companies that are ultimately going to fail, but they'll get rich in the process. I think personally, and I come from the quantum space, so I'm pretty well versed in energy. I think that we're looking at a 5 to 10 year super reliance upon fossil fuels. It's just it's fundamental. But one of the things that interests me, since you mentioned Trump in this conversation, go back to Trump's executive orders. All of his executive orders serve a purpose, and many of them are still in existence today. His last executive order talked about the common commercial usage of small fusion reactors. Nuclear is absolutely the cleanest energy on Earth. I have many different theories behind why nuclear isn't being used, probably because it's very cheap and very clean and no one profits from that. But I believe before I die and before my children are my age, that we will transition, but we will not be transitioning into wind and solar and the other hokey things. We'll transition eventually from the dependence on fossil fuel, which are very difficult to get to, as we all know here, into fusion energy. So I believe that nuclear is the future of commercial energy, and it probably should be. But we have at least 5 to 10 years of a super cycle, meaning we need more oil and more gas than we have today to sustain. And then we probably have 50 years of transitionary period, because you can't just create a new energy system. You have to retrofit every bit of the infrastructure. But I do believe that in the next few years, we will see at least a small introduction of fusion energy. Great question, Andre. Great question. If there are any more, feel free to raise your hand. I've got a few more minutes here, and I'm more than happy to do this. I don't get paid to do this. It's not part of my job. I do it because I love it, and I think people need to know about these things. And this is just kind of my service to God. You know, again, I'll repeat where I started. My people will fail because of their lack of knowledge, and I don't want anyone that I have ever met, that I've ever loved, cared about, or done business with to fail in their life because of lack of knowledge. I think this information is paramount to everyone's success and what they should do with their own money. Their votes, whatever it may be, it all kind of comes back to money. That is the second largest energy source on Earth beyond actual energy, is money. So thank you all for these great questions. Thank you for your time. I hope this information helps you. I hope you share it with other people. I hope you talk about these things openly. God bless each and every one of you and your families. Eric, yes, I absolutely will speak with you privately. It's not a problem at all. Just reach out to your contact here and they'll get us in touch. I'll be more than happy to speak with any of you privately. This is probably the largest opportunity in our lives to impact lives, is by learning what's happening in the world and telling the truth about it. So God bless you all. I hope you have a tremendous week. I won't see you next week, but I'll see you the week after that on our next Rice Report. So God bless you all. Have a great evening to all of you.